Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Gallagher, who is EV Partnerships Manager at Centrica. Hi Mark.
Hi Kate.
Great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Mark, today you and I are going to be focusing on electric vans, the barriers to take up and some of the challenges around public charging. But as we kick off, let's focus on the recent announcements that have come from government with regards to the ICE vehicle end date being pushed back to 2035 and the subsequent ZEV mandate. How do you see that will affect fleets that are operating vans?
For us, we have already publicly made a strong commitment to fully electrify our fleet by 2025. So already 5 years in advance of the previous 2030 cutoff. We are acknowledged as a very ambitious target, but we are still set and aiming for having that transition completed by 2025.
Great. Okay. So for you then, it's not making any difference at all. And I think from fleets that I've spoken to, certainly who have set quite ambitious targets, their plan is to stick with them, which is great news.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important as part of our overall net zero strategy as a business that we continue to drive towards that commitment for 2025.
Yeah, great. Well, that's good to hear. Centrica is an energy provider, so you're quite heavily invested in the development of charging infrastructure. When we think about the public charging infrastructure, quite frequently it crops up that it's not quite fit for purpose for vans. Is this something that you've come across, and what's your take on it?
Thank you, Kate. Absolutely. I think one of the challenges that we've identified with our own fleet and working with stakeholders across fleet and the industry is that immediate improvements can only really be developed by greater investment, particularly greater investment to boost capacity across the entire country, and in particular a focus on rapid chargers to enable greater flexibility for operators.
Yeah, a very good point, Mark. I think most people who are operating national fleets like yourselves will recognise that it's quite patchy across the country. Some areas are particularly well developed where others are essentially charging deserts. And where you've got vehicles that are charging predominantly from the workplace or from employees' homes, that public charging is used as a kind of on-the-go top-up. So the focus really is on the rapid charging or even the high-powered charging.
Absolutely, and I think to add to that, Kate, I think there needs to be more standardisation of rapid charging cost per session across the various operators as well, because that again is another challenge where some particular operators or locations carry a hefty premium versus other providers. So it makes it difficult to necessarily set a fleet policy ruling around charging behaviour and where to direct drivers. Whereas I think if we can get to a position of greater parity across the networks, then it makes it an easier opportunity for operators to access those networks.
And it's so important to be able to manage costs and accurately predict your TCO, which is very difficult to do, particularly with the electricity prices going up and then coming down again. Let's think for a minute. As you've already said, you have very strong plans for electrifying your own fleet, and you've made great progress in that. You've probably got one of the largest electric van fleets in the country at the moment. But let's go to the other end of the scale for the fleets that have not yet begun their electrification journey. What advice have you got for those in terms of working out where and how electric vehicles will work for them?
Great question, Kate. I think one of the key learnings we've taken from our transition has been to really conduct a full analysis and assessment of the operational needs of our drivers to make sure that a vehicle that is fit for purpose in the EV sphere is suitable for them, to really understand where they're operating, how they're operating, what they're carrying in their vehicles, make sure they've got the correct equipment that's needed to do the job. I think until businesses can get a really good understanding of the day-to-day needs and operation of their fleet, it then informs the policy to make the transition to EV.
Yeah, and we hear this time and time again, Mark. It doesn't have to be telematics, but telematics certainly makes that information gathering a lot easier. And with a lot of fleets, you definitely start with the low-hanging fruit. So in your case, where you've got engineers who are taking their vehicles home, that might be that they can charge from home and that their daily mileage is not that great because they're in an urban environment. And you're getting beyond that now, I guess. I mean, you've done all the low-hanging fruit and you're really going after the harder to reach stuff now.
Absolutely. And I think it is supported by the increase of choice of vehicle as well. I think a few years ago, it was difficult to shop beyond the panel van type EV. Whereas now the multitude of new models means there's greater choice and availability of different vehicle categories and payload requirements.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's certainly only getting easier to introduce vans into your fleet. I've got a nice broad question for you now, Mark, to finish on. But what tips have you got for van operators to be more productive and more efficient during their working day?
Absolutely, and another great question, Kate. I think the biggest kind of thing that we found within transitioning our own fleet to EV has really been around education. So really getting people to understand that it's a bit of a change from what they're used to with diesel vans and even hybrid in some instances with our company car fleet. But actually, there's an opportunity to optimize the way you work, to plan ahead. And actually, that education is a big part of making that transition. And particularly once drivers are into an EV, educating them on how best to optimize their driving to maximize range, to get the best access to charging points, not be caught short.
This is Mark. It's great advice, absolutely fabulous advice. And this thing about driving is never more so important when you're driving a vehicle that has a slightly limited range compared to a traditional ICE vehicle. And I've had loads of feedback from fleet managers who are saying sometimes their least efficient drivers suddenly become their most efficient drivers when they switch into an EV, because otherwise they'd be charging up every other day or every night. So they really are learning to nurse those vehicles and get the very best out of them.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that we found is that our engineers want to minimise downtime as much as possible, and obviously being stopped to charge publicly, whether it's rapid or a slower charging session, brings downtime that they could otherwise be using to help our customers.
Yeah, well, Mark, I'd like to thank you very much for your insight today. Really great to talk to a fleet who is leading by example and has such great lessons to pass on. So I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank Centrica for joining GreenFleet Talks.
Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you. And of course, thank you for watching. Please tune into GF365 again soon.